What's up, YouTubers? Welcome back. It's been a while since I did a Joy Toy review, so today we're going to be looking at two different items at the same time. Today we're going to look at the Saluk Flame Dragon Cavalry, both Crimson and Shadow Edition. Now over here on the right you can see the Shadow Edition, and over here on the left is the Crimson Edition. Now I figured I'd do these both together because they're essentially the same sculpt with some minor differences. And these of course are for the 1/18 scale line. Now let's look at the packaging here. If we flip it around to the back, you can see some of the product images on each of the packaging. Now looking at the shadow box over here on the right, you can see this comes with a male figure, and there's some different pictures right here. Over here on the Crimson Edition, this actually comes with a female, and you can see her pictured right there. And of course this just gives you some really good reference on how the figure looks with the actual dragon and or hover bike. Still not sure what we're going to call this. If I turn it to the side, you can see this is from the Battle for the Stars chapter of the Joy Toy line. And as we flip it back around to the front, once again, another fantastic look at the drawing on each one of the boxes. Now each one of these packagings do have an open flap on the front so you can see the inside, but unfortunately the glare would just not show up on camera, so let's open these up and check them out. With everything laid out on the bench here, you can see what's included in each one of the packagings. We'll look at the Crimson Dragon first over here, and she comes with this long staff, a helmet, and a set of fists, as well as her mount, the figure, and this flight stand. Now each one of these comes with their own flight stand. Looking at the Shadow Edition, of course she comes with a figure, a helmet, this really fantastic sword, a set of fists, his hover bike, and his own flight stand. Alright, let's take a look at her accessories first. And this is a really amazing looking dual-bladed axe on the end of this long staff. And just look at this fantastic detail and sculpting that they did on this. Nice dual blades, really sharp, tapered edges. Detail carries on both sides with a little bit of red highlight. And this really long staff that's actually longer than the figure itself. Let me lay this down, and next we'll take a look at her helmet. She comes with this really fantastic looking sculpted helmet with these really ominous red eyes and red highlights on the front. I love how it's flared back like this. And of course this is an additional head, not so much a helmet, so you have to pop the actual head off the figure and pop this on. She also comes with a set of fists right here. See if I can grab these without dropping them. And on the back of these hands there's some silver highlights. And again, these are closed fists. One thing to note, the product art on the actual web page shows each one of these figures comes with 2 additional sets of hands, but unfortunately my packaging only came with 1. Alright, let's look at the figure itself. Really fantastic looking head sculpt. She's got this pixie looking haircut with these elf type ears. Now this chrome outfit or armor really contrasts well with her black outfit. You can see it comes down to her legs. Really fantastic armor with some red knee pads and shin pads here. If I turn it to the side, you can see she has some armor on her forearms with a red elbow pad. Again, thigh armor, and it carries down the back side of her legs as well. Looking at the back of the figure, she actually comes with this red cape with her faction logo on it. Now, the unfortunate thing is this is a plastic cape. So in order to get this to move around, you really need to heat it up. So I'm wondering if this is going to be an issue, trying to get her on her dragon or her hover bike, if you will. I guess we'll find out as the review goes on. Looking on this side, again, the same armor carries over to this leg. She has high-heeled boots. And back around to the front. So really fantastic sculpting on this figure. I really like how it's futuristic, and they did a really great job on the head sculpt. Moving over to the Shadow Edition. Now, we'll go over each one of their dragons last. So, let's look at his accessories. Grab his sword. Really fantastic looking bronze type sword. Again, just take a look at all this detail. Really amazing sculpting on this thing for 1/18 scale. The blades right here are really sharp and pointy. And really futuristic. This is almost as tall as he is. Alright, next we'll take a look at his helmet. And this comes in the same bronze type paint job with nice rounded eyes and red highlights on the mouthpiece. Again, I like how it's flared back. Looks like a flight helmet, futuristic, and of course this is, again, an additional head, so you'll have to pop that figure's head off and pop this on. He also comes with a set of fists, and these are just done in a single tone of black. Great looking detail, nothing too special right here, no paint on the back of it or anything like that, but a great addition as well. Now these are really tiny, as you just saw, very easily lost if you're not careful. Alright, let's look at the figure next. And right out of the gate, I can tell you this is a really bulky, heavy figure. Really fantastic sculpting on this thing, and there is some weight to it. Let's start with the head sculpt. Nice maroon face with this silver pointy helmet. Elf ears. Got this nice bright red faction logo on the front of his chest. The bronze highlights over his shoulders here. Black or flat black armor that carries down to the bronze codpiece. You can see all the hoses and things of that nature on his thighs. Nice thick thigh armor and shin armor. Over here on his left shoulder is a faction logo. Really fantastic detail down his legs here. And now you can start to see some of the detail on the jetpack. And here you can see the entire jetpack with some red highlights and all the boosters. More hoses on down that run down his back here. Nice thick calves. Again, another faction logo on his right shoulder. And here's a top look of the actual jetpack, so some venting going on up here. And if we flip it around to the front, you can see all this amazing detail. I'm curious to see how much articulation he has. I think what we'll do is we'll slide all these accessories to the side for each one of the figures. Let me get these figures out of the way as well. And we're going to concentrate on each one of these dragons slash hover bikes. We'll start with the crimson one first. And as I bring it in close, it really starts to show all the amazing sculpting that they did on this. It has a nice crimson color with a little bit of speckling wash to it. A faction logo back here on the rear fairing. I like how they implemented some of the black paint. Nice aggressive front end. As I flip it up, you can see the seat. There's a set of handlebars right there. There's the seat in the middle. These boosters, or rockets, whatever those are. Flip it around to the front. You see the tribal paintwork going down the front. Nice aggressive silver teeth, if you will, on the front end. Same detail carries over to this side. Now the faction logo back there, and if I flip it up, you can actually see the jet ports right there. So I'm curious to see which one's going to be your favorite at the end of this review, this crimson one or the shadow version. Alright, let's take a look at the shadow version next. And you can't beat the black bronze highlights that this thing carries. Again, it's the same exact mold as the crimson one. Black with bronze right there and a faction logo on the rear fairing. Same detail with the seat and handlebars up here on the front end. It also has a silver speckling or wash to it. Here's the back view. Turning around to this side, again another faction logo in the back side here. If I flip it up, you can also see the painted jet ports underneath, and you know, I just noticed underneath the front end here there's some more jet ports right there, and that's the same on the crimson one as well. I like how they incorporated this articulation on the front end, so you can put the nose up or down based on how the figure sits on the bike itself. Now for the last accessory, each one of these packages comes with their own flight stand, and this is actually the first time in my collection that Joy Toy offers a flight stand. It's a nice clear acrylic with some texture right there, and this just plugs into a hole right there. So that ports in nice and snug. Up top here, there's an articulated point that goes up and down. And it also included this additional port right here, and I just stuck it on this peg so I wouldn't lose it. I'll have to look at the instructions as we go along to see what those are all about. And like I said, each one of these comes with their own flight stand. Now, before we transform these into the dragons, I did want to show you that each one of the figures does successfully ride on each one of these hover bikes. Slide him back, and we'll take a look at the crimson one first. And here you can see she is actually holding on to the handlebars. Her butt is a little high here, but that's just due to the cape. I did heat up the cape just to get it to sit flat on the boosters, so you can adjust that as you go. She is holding onto these handlebars nice and tight, and she is not going to fall off of this thing. This looks really fantastic, and I have to tell you, be it that these hover bikes transform into dragons, that was the draw for me to buy both these sets. Now, looking at the Shadow version, I have to tell you, I wasn't sure if this big bulky figure was going to successfully ride on this thing, but as you can see, he's sitting on this thing, no problem at all. His hands are on the handlebars, holding on to both of those. He also is not going to fall off, and he is a heavy figure. And the included engineering of the articulated front end really helps with different size figures. Let me flip these both around to the front so you can get a front end view. Nice, fantastic looking sculpt on both these figures, and you can see them racing across the sky, taking care of business. The designers really pulled out all the stops with both these sets. Now, let's go over the flight stands, and if I flip one of these up, you can see a peg hole right there, and that's the same on the Shadow Edition. That's for the flight stand. And I'm really curious to see if these flight stands are going to hold all this weight, so you give me a moment here and I'll try to port this in the hole. I kind of think that these things are going to be a little too heavy, and as I feared, this just does want to droop down. Now let me try to flip this dragon around to center the gravity of weight over the actual stand. Excuse my handwork here in front of camera. Let's get this to go. Port that back in. And yeah, as I feared, the additional weight of maybe the figures and the configuration of the way this bike is, I think it's just a little too heavy to get it centered over this flight stand. Now, I know each one of these flight stands does have an adjustment right here. You can just tighten up that screw to tighten this up. But I got to tell you, this is pretty tight right now. So unfortunately, I just don't think that the hover bikes in this configuration are going to actually sit up on top of these flight stands. I'll have to fool around with it again after the review, and maybe I can get it to work. And certainly if you own these, let me know in the comments below if it works for you. Now, I do understand when these are transformed into the dragon mode, the center of gravity is a lot more condensed and smaller. So maybe these are only for dragon mode. Now, another item that I didn't show at the beginning of the video is each one of these comes with their own instruction sheet. Now, mind you, each one of these transforms exactly the same. The only difference is the head sculpts, because their heads actually are different. And as I open this up, I'll give you a brief overview of how many steps is involved to transform this from a hover bike into the actual dragon. And you can actually transform this without removing any of the parts. As you can see here, there's 4 steps on this side. And if I flip it around to the back side, see how many steps are back here. It looks like there's 5, 6, 7, looks like 10 complete steps for this particular dragon. And it looks like the last step does have to do with the actual head sculpt. What I'm going to do is actually transform these on camera. I will try to speed it up so I don't bore you to death. I'm sure I'm going to have to do this a few times just to get it right. So, we'll go ahead and get that going. Alright, we'll start with the Shadow Edition first, and in no particular order did I pick this, and just to remind you that these things are exactly the same with the exception of the head sculpt, so here we go. Alright, that wasn't so bad at all. And according to the instructions, the last 2 steps for this particular dragon is you actually want to open up his jaw right here, and the horn on top of his head goes up. And here you can see the dragon mode. This is actually articulated, which is kind of cool, and if you open it up all the way, you can see there actually is a cannon inside of his mouth. I'll bring that in a little closer so you can see. And here we have the dragon mode. I have to tell you, this thing absolutely looks fantastic. It is a little fiddly, not going to lie. There's some minor adjustments I have to make here, and as you saw on camera, one of these parts did pop off, and all these parts are just friction fit, so there's no fear of breaking them, so they all do remove, and they just friction back on. And I'll have to look at the instructions again, but this thing is really articulated, which we'll go over in a moment. And as you can see, the wings are articulated right here. Everything moves around. These things flail in and out, which we'll go over in a minute. And I'm really curious now that it's in the Dragon mode if it's actually going to fit on the flight stand. So here's the port right there. And as I thought, it's dead center of the body. Let's put this on the flight stand here. Let me bring the camera up. And, yep, here he is on the flight stand. I think this just works just because he's not so long as he is wide now. And he looks really great up here. If you want to, you can tighten up that screw to get a little bit more diving motion or flying motion if you want to. But I don't think he looks that bad up here. And he is pretty secure, so I'm not afraid that he's going to drop off and smash on my table or anything. So take this off and put him back on the table. I'm really curious to see how he scales with his rider. So let me set this over here. Get that out of the way, and let me grab the figure and straighten him up. And let's just see what he looks like next to his dragon. So this gives you a good idea of what the scale looks like in this mode. Absolutely fantastic team here, and the color schemes work great. Let's slide him aside. We'll bring in the Crimson Bike. We'll do a comparison with the Dragon and the Bike mode. So here's the Bike mode. So you're going from this to this. So really great engineering. The more I play with these things, the more impressed I seem to get. Now, just to reiterate, to transform the Crimson one, it's the same exact way, with the exception of the head sculpt. There's no horn on the Crimson Dragon. They are a little fiddly, I'm not going to lie, but if you're any type of Transformer fan, you know you got to play around with these things a few times to get the transformation down just right. Alright, let's go over some of the articulation. Now, his head does go down and up really well. That's a nice diving attack mode with his mouth open. The legs are articulated, and of course that's just as with everything else due to the transformation, so these rotate up and down. Each one of the toes is articulated independent of each other. The tail goes up and down, so you can get a nice tuck in or diving mode. Now each one of the wings is ratcheted. As you can see, they click into place, so there's no fear that these things are going to droop over time. Right here, there's some pivot points. So you can pull the wings in and up. All the way up like this if you like. So really fantastic range of motion on the wings. Now the pods up top here are removable, but they also do rotate back and forth. So all in all, some really amazing detail and articulation in the Dragon mode. That horn on the head is a really nice touch. Now, please be careful, it is rather thin. Wouldn't want you to break that off. And again, the same articulation is for the Crimson Dragon as well. Well, with the Shadow one slid aside off camera, I went ahead and transformed the Crimson one as well. I wanted to put these two side by side so you can get a good look, and as you can see, it's all the same sculpt for the legs, the body, the tail, the wings. The only differences are the heads. And right here, I bring him in nice and close. You can get a good look at the head sculpts. He has red beady eyes on this Shadow version with the horn, and the Crimson one, this does not open. That's just a painted effect on the top of his head. He has 4 yellow eyes. Again, articulated mouth with the cannon inside. Nice, fantastic detail when you have these two side by side. Trying to get these both on camera for you. One more thing I wanted to point out while I have them on camera is If you take a close look at each of their wings, the way I transformed them was a little differently. Over here, this wide shield portion is in the front with the tip in the back, and this one, it's actually on top of the joint. Now I did this on purpose just so I could see what kind of articulation I can get out of each one of these. And again, there's no set rules. You can certainly follow the instructions, but I wanted to see if any of the articulation changed in any of these configurations, and they certainly do. I did not remove any of the parts. I just transformed them in my hand just to see what it was going to look like, and this gives you a good side-by-side look at how you can do this. Now, according to the package art, you can actually take the figures and they can actually ride these dragons. I went ahead and swapped out each of their head sculpts and put their helmets on so you can get a good look at that. And this really changes up the look at each of the figures. I'm really curious to see if these are going to work, so let's go ahead and start with the big bulky guy first. I'm not really sure if he's going to fit well, but I guess we're going to find out together. And manipulate him in a seating position. Now if we grab the dragon here, I think we're going to have to bring the wings down a little bit and try to open up that seat because he is pretty bulky. See if I can't drop his legs in here. Oh, he does slide in there relatively well. So I guess technically he can ride this. Unfortunately, there's really nothing for him to grab onto. Let's try her. Again, with this cape, it might be a little difficult. Get her in a seating position, and I did not heat up the cape this time, as you can see. Let's see if her slender body goes on any easier. It should. Oh yeah, she'll slide on here. Now, unfortunately, again, with her, there's nothing to hold on to. But they do certainly ride on the back of the dragons. I wouldn't recommend picking these things up and tipping them over. I'm not sure how well they're going to hold on if you tip them upside down, but I guess technically they can ride on here. Now, you certainly can move these missile pods or boosters out like this, or, you know, completely remove them if you like to get her in nice and close. But yeah, no, she definitely does sit on the back of the dragon. Now, because her body type is a lot thinner, the tail is out straight, whereas on the shadow version you can see it's more tipped up, and that's just due to the bulk of the actual figure. With a little bit of manipulation and fiddling around, I guess you can get these to sit on a little bit better. Now, before we wrap up this video and go over the articulation, I did want to show you how each one of these figures holds their weapons. And this is a really top-heavy staff, and believe it or not, she's got a nice tight grip on this. She is not going to drop it. Of course, you can put both her hands on it if you want to and get her into some pretty dynamic poses. But I was actually really impressed that she could hold this thing with one hand. Alright, let me take this off and get it out of the way. Move him back, and we'll go over her articulation first. As always, we'll start with the head. You look left, right, really far back like this. Tuck her chin in nice and tight. Coming down to the arms. Get a T pose out of these. Her shoulders do rotate 360 degrees. Her elbows do bend. Now just mind you, take care to bend them in the right direction. Her wrists do rotate 360 degrees. This particular wrist bends in this direction, whereas the other wrist moves in the other direction. Get her arm to rotate around here, and you can see that moves in this direction. Moving on to the midsection, underneath the breastplate there's an articulation point, and that is on a ball joint, so you can get some really great range of motion on this, back and forth. Now, the unfortunate thing is this hard plastic cape is attached to the armor. And it would have been nice if this was cloth, so it wouldn't have been so heavy. But as you can see, really great range of motion right here. Now coming down to the waist, there is no cut there, just all the articulation is on the breastplate. Coming to the legs, she can only do the splits about this far, and that's just due to the armor on her thighs. She can Spartan kick forward nice and high.
This is Sparta!
Of course, she has the double knee joint really tight bend here. She does have a thigh cut. That's hidden by the sculpt work. That goes back and forth. Now, if we move on down to the ankle here, this does rock back and forth in this direction. She can only point her foot up about this high, and she can point her toe down really well. Even though she's wearing these big boots, she can still move her feet really well. And underneath each of these is a hole for a figure stand. Really great range of motion on this particular figure, and just by happenstance, she's sashaying for us right here on camera. So you can get some really great range of motion back and forth too. Now the unfortunate thing is this hard plastic cape. I really would have liked if they included a cloth cape instead of this hard plastic. So maybe in the future that's what they'll include. Alright, let's move over to this bulky figure. As you can see, he's holding onto the sword nice and tight. He's not going to drop this thing, and let's see if he can put both his hands on this, and I don't think he's going to be able to with all this bulky armor. Yeah, that's what I feared. There's just way too much armor for him to grab this with two hands. Oh well. Alright, let's get this out of the way and go over his articulation. And we'll start with his head. His head can move left and right. He can look up this far. He can tuck his chin in this far. Not too bad. Now coming over to his shoulders. Again, with all this armor, that's about as high as you're going to get his shoulders. That's just due to the sculpting. Of course, these rotate 360 degrees as needed. Coming down to his elbows. These rotate 360 degrees, and you know what? That female figure does this as well. I missed that on camera. 90-degree bend at the elbow. Rotation at the wrists. Just like the female, this wrist goes in this direction. And the other hand goes in the other direction. Up and down like this. Alright, coming down to the diaphragm. He does have a diaphragm cut. There is a little bit of wiggle back and forth. He can tip back really nicely and only tip forward about this far. He does have waist articulation, unlike the female. Get his arm straightened out here. So you can rotate him at the waist. Back and forth. And let's see how far back he can lean with the waist. So he can go really far back, and that'll come in helpful with those jetpacks. He can bend forward this far. Now let's see if there's any articulation with these jetpacks. Turn this around here, and no, unfortunately, these are just molded on. There's no rotation, nothing at all. Alright, let's go down to the legs. You can only do the splits about this far, with all those bulky armored thighs. He does have a thigh cut, which does rotate back and forth. Now he can only Spartan kick forward about this high, and again, he's a really bulky figure. So, a little less than 90 degrees. Let's flip him around here and see how far his knee bends. Alright, not too bad. Now when we come down to his feet, very limited articulation down here due to the sculpting. He can point his toe down. Now he can only get 90 degrees out of his boot. Again, that's just due to all the sculpting down here. But he actually does have toe articulation. So this goes up and down. Now I believe he has rocker ankles, so yeah, they do go back and forth in this direction. And of course, he also has holes on the bottom of his feet for a figure stand. I often found it kind of curious that Joy Toy doesn't offer figure stands with all their figures, even though that they have holes on the bottom of their feet. I think that would be a really nice addition to add with all their figures. So that's going to wrap up the articulation for both these figures. And with that, this is going to wrap up my review of both Saluk Flame Dragon, Cavalry Shadow, and Crimson Edition sets. These are a really fantastic addition to my Joy Toy army, and if you're into that sword and sorcery meets science fiction, these are right up your alley. The way the hover bikes turn into dragons are relatively simple, the design is fantastic, and this is just one more example of how Joy Toy pushes the envelope and comes up with new creative ideas. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching. If you like what you see, join the community. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hit that bell for future notification of upcoming videos. I sincerely appreciate you taking time out of your day to come visit my little section of the YouTube verse. And most importantly, help a fellow collector out and share your knowledge.